facts is that the most frequently used policy terms in President Buhari's Independence Day speech were economic, that was used 13 times, development, that was used 10 times, corruption was used 8 times, and security, which was used 7 times. President Buhari covered a lot of ground in his speech. He talked about his administration's plan for the economy, their plans for security, humanitarian intervention, and the fight against corruption. So we're looking at that. We're going over what the president said, and we have guests joining us to give their assessment of the points he made. Mr. Libor Oshoma is somewhere on this building. He stepped out for a bit. In the studio with us is Andy Oboh, who is a venture capital executive. It's good to have you back on the show, sir.
Good to be back, Aghogho and Sandra.
And now throughout the show, we'll take calls as you listen. We'll hear from you what you have wanted, what you would have wanted the president to talk about in his Independence Day speech. What would you have preferred for him to address? And if you were his speech writer, what would you have had him tell the Nigerian people? Joining us now is also Buhari'S Oshoma, who is a constitutional lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us on Hard Facts. You often hear him on the Morning Crossfire.
Buhari'S Oshoma, Anegbete, eh?
Yes.
You often hear him on the Morning Crossfire. It's a very rare voice on Hard Facts.
Snatched him as he was trying to run away. Huh?
Yeah. So let me start by asking you, Mr. Oshoma, in your opinion, what is the purpose of a president's Independence Day speech? What should the president be hoping to achieve with that speech?
Ordinarily, for a day like this, an Independence Day speech is ought to be, a stock-taking event and then inspire hope in the people. And then, when you work in private organizations, there's what they call feedbacks and KPIs, But unfortunately, for government organizations, there are no feedbacks, there are no KPIs. Even manifestos are not to be kept. That's why they will tell you their campaign promises anyway. And it's as if campaign promises are promises that shouldn't be kept. And so that's why, unlike before, people look forward to Independent Day speech, or events speech from the government. So one of such opportunities where government actually talk to you when you hear them, reel out achievements and their expectations or during budget presentations. But unfortunately, these days, people no longer want to listen because they just feel what's there to say anyway. And then more like when it was just government's own media stations, so they could tell you what they want you to hear. But now that you have private media stations like Nigeria and others, and then with advent of social media, people could actually, with a click of the button, access information worldwide. And so some of these things these days, it's easy for people to cross-check facts. And so that's why, but unfortunately, on the government side, I don't know whether it's difficult for them or they are still not woken up to the reality that, information is easily available these days. So they still, wallow in that, old style of doling out rhetorics and, truth and half-truth. And so that's why most of these speech these days are, probably missing and uninspiring.
Do you agree with this, Mr. Oboh?
Yes, I have to. The Independence Day speech for a president is a gimme speech. It's a very easy speech. I started out my life as a writer.
Okay.
And when you're writing a speech for somebody like this is one of the easiest speeches to write. It's like for a pastor, your Christmas Day address. Everybody has come to listen to you. Yeah. Everybody is already happy that it's Christmas, right? So it's a very easy speech to give. What you're trying to do is tell people, remind people about where we've come from.
Okay.
That what is the day about? The day is about our freedom. We've taken our destiny into our hands as a nation, and it was a difficult struggle, but our forefathers, our founding fathers did it 59 years ago, and lion no dey born goats. We, the Nigerians of today,
were born of the Nigerians of 60 years ago who fought and won. So the power that they had, the spirit that they had then, we have it now.
You are even more inspiring than...
I know, I have good people.
So the problems that we are facing today are not as big as the problem of subjection and domination by the British. And so if we could afford them off then, we can fight these problems off now today. Yeah. And you try your best not to be political about it. You try your best not to make it an APC versus PDP thing. Yeah. You try your best to make it we're all Nigerians today. Yeah. And this is what we're going to do going forward. This is what we're doing now, and this is what we're going to do going forward. Yeah. It's a very simple speech to give. Yeah. And no, but instead it gets bogged down. And I have to agree that it's because of our past. When I was young, when I was a child, and they would take us to go and do march past on Independence Day and all of that. But the first thing early in the morning, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, we would have the Independence Day speech from General Babangida or General Buhari. And it was always the same thing. Independence is not a day for celebration. It is a day for sober reflection. I'm calling on Nigerians to reflect on the ways you have failed your nation and how you can change and improve to make Nigeria a better place. So it has always been this attitude that, no, government is doing everything, government is perfect. You Nigerians are the ones at fault. So Independence Day, instead of being the independence speech, instead of being a speech to inspire us, has been a speech for scolding us my whole life. And even though now we're not being scolded as much, we still have this feeling of government saying, oh no, we're doing everything perfectly. Well, it's up to you people. Don't stop shouting on social media. Stop doing this, stop, So I think it was...
You're going to, be decisive with speeches
right.
that tend to foster insecurity and national threat to national security.
We shouldn't be warned and threatened on an Independence Day speech. There are 364 other days for that.
Let me come to you, Liboros. I will show on this one. Because Chukudi, our dear chief caretaker, was out on the street speaking with people. And you just had this sense of cynicism with the way people responded on the issue of the Independence Day anniversary. Either the rains prevented them from listening to the president's broadcast, or even if they did, they did not have electricity to watch what he had to say. But thankfully, there's social media that people can go and read the full text of the speech. But the last 1 week now, the president's had to give two speeches, one at the UN General Assembly and the other one, we don't often get the luxury of hearing the president speak in succession. So when it happens, people tend to quickly look at what he has said there and what he has said now, compare and contrast. There's not really much difference in, I think you talked to Chief Andy about this idea that it's a campaign promise, and on the other hand, it's to look at issues like security, unemployment, and run away from issues like patriotism or what I think it just mentioned on the opening about our founding fathers, what they did, and that was the last we heard.
Yeah, just three words.
And they moved on to other things. But this idea, Buhari'S, of the people versus the elite, because all of them, most of them, pointed fingers back at the ruling class and the elite for putting us in the mess we're in today. And there also appears to be some confusion over saying what is accurate in a speech. If he went the ways of previous people and just sugar-coated the Nigerian situation and not be frank and say this is what we are facing, then he will be dealt with saying you're running away from the reality. And then you go ahead and say the reality of where we are, they say you are weak and not being able to deal with the problems facing the country. What are your thoughts on this?
Do you know why government have protocol offices? This protocol department, they teach you how to be very diplomatic and how to tell a man go to hell and he'll be happy going to hell. How not to tell a man how are you and he gets angry and asks you will be mates. So that's why in some cases they say you have to be presidential in your outlook, in your manner, in the way you talk. Don't be weak. Be firm, but don't be harsh. Being firm does not necessarily mean you're harsh. Being decisive does not mean you're wicked. But people tend not to understand the diverse in all of this thing, and so that's why we in Nigeria we say we are a nation of lions being led by goats. And so you have the worst of us ruling the best of us. And then there is no speech that, no matter how sugar-coated, that will take away the fact that there is hunger out there. There is nothing you're going to tell the people who are losing their jobs in drove that, well, we have plans in a pipeline. When in actual sense, when in reality, they see affluence all around you. You're not cutting down expenses. You are not, your lifestyle is still the same. And then you tell them, don't worry, there is hope for Nigeria. They'll look at you and say, look, forget this man. It's all rhetorics. And that's why the people on the street will tell you that, look, whatever government has to say, they've heard it over and over again. Because apart from the speech, you have to, action speaks louder than words. Your action will speak. You see, one big problem we have with government, not just this government. Fella said, when Shagari finish, he win election. They don't tell him, say, make mistake. Say, this will not be democracy. And then also, he meet empty treasury. Buhari came after, he met empty treasury. Babangida came, he met empty treasury. Shoneko came, he met empty treasury. They are always meeting empty treasury, and yet their lifestyle, will be the same, or they will improve on it a little bit. And so
someone needs to do a remake of that Fela song to include the other actors now.
Exactly. So when you look at all of this, vis-a-vis the speech from government, and then you put yourself in that position, and then government tells you that the responsibility of government is the security and welfare, is your security and welfare. You find it very difficult to juxtapose the two. When a government will threaten free speech, but will be very willing and happy to give amnesty to those who are carrying arms and killing people, you now begin to ask yourself, really, is it, safe or convenient to conclude that this government really means well for you? And no speech, no matter how beautifully, scripted, would take away those feelings on the street. And that's why some journalists, you people will say, take it to the man on the street. If your economy is so beautiful on paper, take it to the man on the street. How is the man on the street feeling it? So what's the news coming from the street? It's ordinarily what I expect the government, the feelers that the government should listen to and say, well, if we are seated at top here and we'll have lights at the villa, in governor's lodge, we'll have everything, but let's listen to the voices on the street. But, that doesn't happen here. The moment you start telling them, what is happening on the street, they will label you detractors, you're unpatriotic, and in some cases, journalists are hounded, don't over-report this negative news. So you see foreign journalists...
don't make the government look bad. Instead of trying to make sure that the country isn't bad.
Yes.
And make sure the government doesn't look
bad. And then when all of this, it's very obvious, and then that same government comes to you with beautiful speeches, well scripted. And then another thing, the saddest part of it is that there's a disconnect between the reader and the speech. There is a way, like I said, there's a way you talk to your people. It comes from the hearts, and people will, the message will be taken home, and people would want to go, die for that country.
It sounded like, as he was reading it, was the first time he was seeing it.
But when a script is written for you, and then maybe a few hours before the time you just glance through and then you are reading it, it's like, you're a class monitor, you'll be given a script, go and read it to the class, so you just read it. It doesn't come from the heart. It's not, there is no connection between you and that speech.
All right, let's look
so
at...
it's difficult for people to actually follow or believe
in what you're saying. Let's look at some of the points that he mentioned when he was reading that speech. I mentioned during the introduction that a few words he mentioned a number of times. So economic was said 13 times in that speech, development was said 10 times, corruption was said 8 times, and security was said 7 times. Let's start with security. Security, the president talked about the fight against Boko Haram. He said this, quote, "In the last 4 years, we've combated the terrorist scourge of Boko Haram. We owe a debt of gratitude to our gallant men and women in arms, through whose effort we've been able to achieve the present results." End of quote. But last week, Mr. Boforibo, a member of the House of Reps from Borno State, Honorable Ahmad Jaha, said that Boko Haram controls 8 out of 10 local government areas in northern Borno. Now, Jaha is from the president's party, by the way. Before we go ahead, let me mention that. So did the president's statements about battling Boko Haram reflect the true picture on ground?
This is exactly what my colleague here was saying. You have this disconnect in the speeches between what is being said in the speech and what we Nigerians are seeing on ground. And this is not a problem that is unique to President Buhari. It's a problem that we see all down with our presidents, our governors, everybody. There tends to be this insistence on talking about things in the best possible light, even if it doesn't reflect the reality on ground. The reality on ground is that Boko Haram is still a menace. Boko Haram is, yes, we have been fighting Boko Haram. Our armed forces have been fighting Boko Haram for years. But that they have been fighting for years does not mean they've been successful for years. Earlier on, we had the Chief of Army Staff telling us that there's a lot of sabotage, that there's a lack of morale, that the boys are not fighting hard enough. We had that from the Chief of Army Staff. He's in charge of the military. And so when we now want to talk about it as if it was this brave battle that is going on and it's being successful, and we're now saying we owe a debt of thanks, we're saying that it's been successful. And we've just heard 8 out of 10 of the northern LGAs in Borno are under the thrall of Boko Haram. So the two things do not
Tally.
they don't tally. And this is a problem we have. You don't have to, and it's going back to the point Aghogho raised between being called firm versus being called weak or being called out of touch. You don't have to say everything is fine in order to appear, like in charge. The example I always give, because since we're comparing speeches, we're talking about the presidential speech, and he's talking about war. Let's talk about the classic speeches from heads of state about war. Winston Churchill talking about World War II. He was talking about the impending German invasion of the UK. Now, everybody realized that Germany would overrun the UK. They'd overrun Poland, Czechoslovakia, France. Nobody could stop them. And definitely the UK couldn't stop them. Churchill did not go on the radio and say, "Oh yes, our brave men are fighting them and it's under control." He didn't say that. He said, "Look, they're about to come and kill us. They're about to overrun us. They're going to conquer us. But we're Britain. We will never surrender." He said, "We will fight them in the air. If they defeat us in the air and they land, we will fight them on the beaches. If they defeat us on the beaches, we'll fight them on the highways. If they defeat us in the highways, we'll fight them in the city. If they defeat us in the city, we'll fight them in our houses. If they defeat us in our houses, we'll fight them from our graves. We will never surrender until the rest of the world comes to help us fight these Germans." And he was admitting their weakness. He was admitting that defeat was coming, but he was able to inspire his people to say, "We will not surrender. We will fight it till the very end, till the last Briton dies." And that was enough to inspire his people. So we don't have to tell lies about the situation in the Northeast in order to inspire our people. We can tell them the truth and say, "But we're Nigeria. We don't quit. We'll fight them, and we'll fight them until we have defeated them."
Now, still on security, Mr. Shoma, Barrister Shoma, President Buhari
Mr.
also...
Mr.
Oh, Mr. Okay. President Buhari also talked about adding 10,000 constables to the police and setting up a police trust fund. Do you think these measures will improve the performance of the police?
Everything that the Nigerian police needs to improve it, nobody should be telling me. I want to see it. Don't tell me we will. We will. Because, see, policing is a different ball game altogether in Nigeria. We don't do policing here. We don't do policing. And so, like, typical of our problems, it's not enough to throw money at our problems. Yes, we need men. We need more men. It's not the first time we are recruiting more hands. But another thing we also fail to realize is the fact that when government says we'll recruit 10,000 men, did you bother to ask how many are retiring? Because every year, you have a number, that certain numbers that are retiring. And how much are we doing to ensure that we fill those vacuum, those gaps? You know, you hear people are promoted. You know, are we recruiting? So nobody thinks about this thing. So when you just hear, you know, government is recruiting 10,000, you think that, oh, the numbers that are there are already there, so you just it's constant. But we forget that some are retiring. This month some will retire, next month others will retire, just like that. You know, so, and then the police trust fund. You see, Lagos State started police trust fund long ago. You know, it worked, and then at some point also they also had to establish, you know, their own state policing to control traffic, you know, and then a neighborhood watch. You know, all of these are managed from the police trust fund. What that has shown over the years is the fact that the federal government cannot police the entire country alone. So there ought to be collaboration. Let's not talk as if, you know, it's a government that is just coming on board. It's a government that has been there. They've won another re-election.
Right.
We want to see, you know, plans and programs that are, you know, have been, you know, in the pipeline, that have been executed. And not every speech you come tell us, oh, we'll recruit more police, we'll recruit more army, we'll buy more arms.
And since this is the independence anniversary, it's great to look back at 60,
yes,
what the police was like, and then have state
exactly.
police today.
Ordinarily, you remember in the 60s, we had state police. Ibadan, when you hear of Ibadan Native Authority, Lagos Island Native Authority, what do you think they were? They were state police. But these are things that we did those days, and today we'll tell you we are not ripe enough for it. I agree, some of these governors are monster. They would use, you know, state police to hand opposition, just the same way federal government is using, you know, the state security apparatus to hand opposition also. But the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. And so, which one would be better for us to have effective policing than embracing kidnappers, militants, and granting them amnesty? You know, so which one would be better for us to create jobs that will engage these people, or allow them to engage in a skilling spree and thereafter embrace them in amnesty and look for where to go train them? You know, so that's why for me, I expected that, you know, speeches like this should be.
Well, you know, interestingly, you mentioned the Niger Delta, and it just occurred to me that in the security initiatives and options he had for the entire country, Boko Haram with the armed forces, the police, increase in the police with kidnappings, and, you know, with the Niger Delta, you have to do with the Niger Delta Commission. So it's a soft approach in dealing with the security challenges facing the Niger Delta, even though it's a matter of conjecture in the Niger Delta, whether the commission has dealt in providing the jobs or the socio-economic initiatives
not at all.
to help deal.
Not at all.
So
Not at
tell us
all.
why you think
You see, you have a Ministry of Niger Delta, you have the Niger Delta Development Commission. And at the end of the day, what you just found out is that, you know, jobs are created for the boys. You know, the responsibility, the state's responsibility are taken over now by some commissions or by some ministries. Niger Delta Development Commission ought to ordinarily be an ad hoc arrangement pending where government would sit down and have a proper plan, either to decentralize powers to the states involved, you know, or have a workable financial arrangement to ensure that the states are viable. But when you create states within states, you're definitely going to have competition, and then in some cases, if there are no serious checks, you create conduit pipe for cronies to enrich themselves. And that's why you see people will struggle and kill to go head Niger Delta Commission. If you contest for governorship, you don't get it. You see, there's a commission somewhere. And some others are agitating for Northeast Commission now. And we can only hold on for, you know, a little while. Before you know it, you have that commission to redevelop, you know, the Northeast. But we cannot keep doing this development commission here, development commission there, and then expect that things would change. It won't change.
And
You know,
if I may here, sorry, because of course I'm from the Niger Delta, and one of the issues we've had from the beginning with this is it's a political solution. It has never been a developmental solution. So you have a situation where the militants rise up, and the militants are interfering with oil production, and that is starving the government at all levels.
Yeah.
And so the question now became, well, we can't fight them. We can't defeat them. If the security agencies were able to defeat the militants, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
They would have just wiped them out the way Sarawiwa was wiped out. But they couldn't defeat them. So they say, okay, then what do we have to do? Well, let's go to the negotiating table. All right, we'll say there's an amnesty, and let us put these boys on a payroll. And that payroll ensures that they allow the oil to keep flowing. We call it amnesty, we call it training, we call it whatever it is. Then, okay, the political class from the Niger Delta, who may or may not be the ones agitating these boys to do all this, let's also do something for them. So we already had the Niger Delta Development Commission. Then now we create the Niger Delta Ministry, right? And all of these things are patronage. All of these things are, so you have the boys, the militants are being settled through, amnesty and all of that. You have the politicians being also settled through the patronage system in these parastatals and these ministries. But the people who are left out of these equations are the actual people of the Niger Delta. Now, under late Umaru Yar'Adua, we had the Niger Delta Master Plan for the development of the Niger Delta. And the Ministry of the Niger Delta was created to implement that master plan.
Right.
Now, when was the last time we heard anybody talk about the KPIs of the Niger Delta Master Plan and say, okay, this year, this is what the Niger Delta Master Plan calls for. So this year, this is what the ministry and the NDDC are going to be doing. It hasn't happened since Yar'Adua died. And so that means the actual people, the human beings in the Niger Delta, the people whose land and water is being devastated by the oil exploitation, like every other Nigerian, have also been disowned by the government, have also been disowned by the system. But we talk about these things as if we have actually solved the problem. We haven't. Now, like my colleague said, now Northeast has a development commission as well. All of these things are just adding more to the federal bill.
Yeah.
A federal bill that cannot be paid. Because right now, the federal government is running deficits every single year. 60% of federal revenues is going to debt servicing. But we're creating more development commissions. We're creating more agencies, more parastatals. The federal government is becoming heavier and heavier and less able to actually deliver services to you and I, to deliver development to Nigerians. And we're being told in our Independence Day speech that government is working.
All right, so let's talk about that speech some more. The president mentioned hate speech on social media. Mr. Shoma, remember, Aghogho actually, remember that we talked about this yesterday. He mentioned this same thing in his speech to the United Nations General Assembly. No, I'm saying you and I talked about it yesterday.
When you said my speech, I was wondering when was that General Assembly?
So he mentioned this hate speech on social media as well at the event last week. Today, he said that his government recognizes the right to free speech, but will take action when that speech threatens national security or undermines other people's rights. Mr. Shoma, how common is divisive speech, and how big a problem is it in reality?
You see, unfortunately, you see, rather than addressing the problems that confront us daily, the government is busy addressing shadows. Who defines hate speech? That's where we need to start from.
You're a lawyer, help us.
Yeah, that's where who defines hate speech? Who defines national security? It is the law that defines national security and what hate speech is. But unfortunately, what we have here is that, you have, rather than have super institutions, you have superhumans. And so these superhumans define what is hate speech, what is national security. So hate speech is according to what they perceive it to be, or what is national security, or what threatens national security. I do not see anything that would threaten national security like the killing spree and kidnapping that, bandits have, and some Fulani headsmen have been involved in. But what we do, we treat it as if, it's a joke. And then you hear people say, no. Even when eyewitness alleged to the fact that, the people that did this were Fulani headsmen, they say, no, you can't be too sure. Don't say so. But when you now say, look, we are going to ensure that we confront this government, they say, it's hate speech. that statement is threatening national security. And then the same government tells you that national security should take preeminence over the rule of law. Meanwhile, it is the rule of law that ordinarily should determine what national security is. And if I feel there's still law of libel and defamation in our books, if you feel that somebody have defamed you or libeled you, why don't you approach the courts for damages? But when government now tries to use that as an opportunity to muzzle free speech, when it is nowhere defined in any book, like my professor Dioahe of blessed memory will say, nowhere defined in any book, and it is according to the definition of that man seated on top there, then there is danger, very, very inherent danger that we are not looking at. Because all it takes is for just one statement, and then they say the DSS will, swing on you and say, that statement is threatening national security.
Do you know why I asked that question, Mr. Shoma? This is an issue the president brings up time after time, year after year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was going there
as well. Because a few years ago, in his Independence Day speech, the president said something that caused a lot of conversations online. Social media, he said that some conversations on social media are, quote, crossing our national red lines. The president seems very worried that there's a lot of divisive hate speech going on social media, and it's going to bring down the nation, right? So hold on. Now, his opponents are saying that he's exaggerating and that the exaggeration is being used as a pretext to clamp down on social media. This is something I also want Mr. Oboh to address as well. We've seen the social media regulation bill circulating. Where do you come down on this?
Look, let's take these issues one after the other. I remember the Nnamdi Kanu's matter, and then that was when the president came and said that some people, their speeches were crossing the national red line, all of those whatever. But the issue the government failed to address is the fact that first and foremost, pre-2015, there's need for us to go back so that we know where we're coming from. Pre-2015, even some people predicted that Nigeria was not going to. There won't be any country after 2015 called Nigeria. But we were able to manage, because the drums of war that the two dominant parties were beating was threatening the soul of the country. But after the election, we were able to manage. Thank God, we managed out of that. And I expected this same president to now realize the fact that he was no longer the candidate of a political party, but the president of those that voted for him and those that didn't vote for him. But what did he do? He was asked in Germany, far away Germany, and he said, how are you going to have an inclusive, all-inclusive? He said, you don't expect me, you don't honestly expect me to treat those that gave me 97% vote the same way I would treat those that gave me 5% votes. And then gradually we saw the president's appointment, including his speeches and all of that. So who else in this country, starting from that statement, had encouraged hatred much more than the president? And so when you do that, what you are telling a section of the country is that you don't belong to us. I am not your president. Do whatever you want to do because you didn't vote for me. I had expected to say, well, I know some people didn't vote for me, but I will ensure that come next election, if I am going to stand for election, I will work assiduously to ensure that I win their confidence so that whether they like you or not, you are now the president of the entire country. That didn't happen. And then his national, media advisor came. If you complain, they say you are a whaler. And so you had the whalers and the hailers. Such a statement that divides a country. They don't unite the country. And then came the poverty, insecurity. Even people ordinarily who should be praying for the government to succeed were praying for the government not to succeed so that they will have the last laugh. And so with all of these challenges and the attitude of the government to the challenges, it was as if the government did not have answers to those challenges. And so started the confrontation. The whalers now started having the last laugh. And so, who will you blame? Is it you that allowed, this hatred? Or the man that's now capitalized on your initiative to confront you to say, well, I told you, you are failing. And so, I expect the same government to retrace their step and say, you know what, like Obama did, we saw this coming, we failed in our national security, we're caught flat-footed, but next time, we'll double our effort. To say, you know what, I agree, we have failed, but now with the support that you have given to me in the last election, I assure you that next time we will do far better beyond your expectation. And so to that extent, we will find ways to build synergies and unity. And lastly, so that I yield the floor for my colleague, when the tension from the southeast was so high, when the president traveled abroad for medical vacation, what extraordinary thing did Oshibanjo do to calm frayed nerves? Nothing, but other than visiting the southeast, he walked on the street of Aba, visited Imo, walked on the street of Yenegua, and everybody was like, so that means government recognized us. Yeah. So you saw...
And interestingly, Pandef, and even though none of those things have been met up to today, but sort of just...
Exactly. So that calmed frayed nerves. Yeah. What people wanted was, that inclusiveness, that recognition that the government is for everybody. But when you are a government for a section of the country, and yet you want everybody to give you that necessary support, you need to retrace your step.
Let me hear from you, Mr. Oboh.
Well, okay. So we've gotten all the reports. We've seen all the reports. The biggest killers of Nigerians right now. You have the headsman, farmer crisis, or whatever they allow us to call it. You have Boko Haram.
Sorry, quickly.
You have the bandits.
How can you call it headsman farmer crisis, where farmers with their farm, somebody comes to invade your farm,
I'll get to
kill
that.
you, and you say it's a crisis?
I'm coming. I'm getting to that.
Government is running away from
I said that on purpose to make a point.
Okay.
So you have the headsman issue, one, killing a lot of Nigerians. Okay. You have Boko Haram. Those are the two main sources of violent death among Nigerians, right? Then you have this banditry and kidnapping as well. The banditry is also killing Nigerians. Then apart from that, you have other things that are killing Nigerians, like malaria, the malaria scourge. Then you have, road accidents, right? So these are the 5 top killers of Nigerians. Do any of these things tweet?
No.
Do any of these things make posts on Instagram or Nairaland? Boko Haram is not tweeting. Bandits are not tweeting. Headsmen are not tweeting. But they are the ones killing Nigerians. So why does Mr. President think that the tweets of Nigerians who are not killing people
who are drawing his
are
attention
a bigger national security issue than the things that are actually killing Nigerians? Fewer people have died from Twitter than from malaria, just as an example. Definitely, I've never seen a headsman tweeting or Boko Haram tweeting. So this is just a red herring. That's the first thing. Then the threat of division to the nation and disruption from social media is just not big enough to even be discussed at the level of the president. It should be below the president's level. That's one. Then 2, as long as Omoyele Sowore and Sambo Dasuki are in detention under the SSS, the federal government has no moral right to talk about violation of people's rights and infringement of our rights.
I'm glad you brought up SSS. We just had the SSS get into a back and forth with Dr. Onoma over an inscription on his T-shirt.
Yes.
Now, in his speech, the president called for restraint, tolerance, and mutual respect. Should the SSS be exercising restraint? I mean,
exactly.
we've had statesmen like Wole Soyinka saying that the SSS is overreacting.
Yes, this is it. The actions of the SSS are a bigger danger to...
You cannot be threatening free speech and at the same time, in the same speech, calling for tolerance.
Right. You have the SSS exercising zero restraint whatsoever. That is even a bigger danger to national peace than anything that anybody's saying on Twitter. When people are being picked up, kept in SSS detention, the courts are saying release them, and the SSS is ignoring court orders. That is a bigger incitement. It's a bigger trigger than anything that a person with no resources can say on Twitter. Because this is the SSS, this is government with the full weight and power of government violating the law, breaking the law, and infringing on the rights of human beings. Omoyele Sowore has a right to bail. Sambo Dasuki has a right to bail, no matter what he's accused of. I hold no brief for Sambo Dasuki. If he's guilty, let him be tried and convicted. I don't care. I don't know him. But the fact that he, as a Nigerian, is on trial and the court says, release this man on bail, and the SSS simply refused. That is alarming to me as a Nigerian, especially considering that I grew up under military rule. So that to me is a bigger problem, because the president said in his speech, considering our history, that we should all exercise restraint. Well, okay, Mr. President, considering our history of oppression at the hands of government, should especially the SSS, which has always been a secret police used to oppress Nigerians in the Abacha years, in the Babangida years, and even in the Buhari years in his first military era. So in that situation, should the SSS not be exercising restraint right now, considering their own dark, twisted, oppressive history? Why should restraint only be on the side of we, the unarmed civilian Nigerians? Why should the people with arms not be exercising restraint? That's my question.
All right, let's bring this conversation to you who's listening at home, because we need to talk a bit about the economy as well. What do you think about free speech and social media? Is there a real threat to national security from online comments, or is the president overreacting? We've had Omoyele Sowore in SSS custody for sane revolution. We've had Dr. Onoma being held by SSS because of his T-shirt, "We are all Biafrans." Are these things all connected? Do you think they're normal reactions by the SSS, or do you think free speech is in danger? 012770993, that's the female caller line. 012770993. You can also call 012771993, 2993 and 3993. If you are male calling the female number, I will not pick up. Benjamin, I see you. Cut that call and call us on your own line. We've got Ibrahim up first. Ibrahim is in Ikeja. Hello, sir. Thanks for calling us.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm very well.
Yeah, I'm listening to your conversation. Your guests, they are very, very critical on this, on this government.
Okay.
But the truth is that the problem of Nigeria is not started by this government, or he brought it by this government. We have a challenge. Today we are celebrating our 59 years. We have our negativity and we have our positivity as well. But the president's speech, for me, is very, very good. And then one thing is that accusing these headsmen, the killing people, and social media, differentiating the two. I never see anything different. The headsmen and those one that, like you are guessing in the studio also, they're saying something that is quite, I think it's not correct for them to be saying also something criticizing the government, especially the barrister. We know him very well. He's a PDP man.
Yeah.
These are the people that you are bringing here, criticizing everybody, bringing the government down.
I see.
Which is wrong, which is totally wrong.
Okay. Don't
They
criticize
have
the
never seen
government.
anything. No. Criticism is okay. When you are not doing right thing, you have to find solution for the problem.
Okay.
I cannot
But don't criticize too much.
Yes, that's it.
All right,
That's it.
Ibrahim. Thank you for calling. Andrew's in Aja. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Welcome.
My name is Andrew from Aja.
Yes.
I just want to quickly say this. You know, we do not understand what military is all about. You see, these people, they are past military men, and their orientation, I don't think it's going to change, because that's how they've been trained to be. Until we'll change the way we elect, people into office, and not elect these same military people, we're going to remain where we are. Because as it is to me, our president is not a civilian. He's a military man. Take it or leave it. That's why you can see that he has that tendency of enforcing, or would I say, military style of approach into certain things. You cannot tell me that people who are on arms are not crossing the red line, but it is people who are just on their phones contemplating, or they're not feeling what the government is doing, and then you're saying there are people who you're going to turn against. That's preposterous. That's not what government is all about. So what I want to say is this: we need to change the way we elect people from our space. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for calling to make a contribution. Hannah is the last call we'll take. Hannah is in transit. Hello, Hannah.
Hello, I think this is Sandra.
Yes, Sandra, welcome.
Okay. Hello, Sandra. Hello, Oboh.
Hello. Please
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
And the gentleman in the studio.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Anna.
Good evening. Well, I think there are better situations that we have, or more pressing situations that we have that needs to be addressed, rather than talking about hate speech at this time. Yesterday, I was talking to somebody and he said that, do you know a bag of rice is now 24,000? I said, what? Now, these are pressing issues. People are hungry. What are we talking about? I like the analysis that one of the gentlemen made about Britain and Germany and the Nazi war and everything. And Britain was still saying, our people, we are lions. A lion has courage and confidence. We will go ahead. You know, these things will instill a lot of confidence and courage in Nigeria. I thought today, as we're celebrating 59th year of our independence, the president is going to come up with speech that will give us courage and confidence and for us to be proud to be Nigerians. And that is what I think we need now. What is the hope that we have for children who are yet unborn? What hope do we have? At 59, we are still at this stage. At 59, we are still... When you reach 59, for a normal human being, you ought to have been a grandfather or grandmother. And there would have been achievements that you have made, and you are also going towards your retirement. So what are we doing at 59? What is Nigeria at 59? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Hannah,
If I can quickly say something.
for calling us. Yes.
Yes, the first caller said that we're so critical of the government, and I think it's a teachable moment. Nigerians need to learn something.
Okay.
Government is the most powerful and richest organization in the country. Government has more money than anybody. Government has more legal power than anybody, and government has more weapons than anybody. So government should have the thickest skin. We should all be able to criticize government without government crying, or without somebody coming to say, oh no, you're too critical of the government. We are supposed to be protecting the weakest among us. We shouldn't all be rushing to protect the strongest entity among us, who is supposed to be protecting all of us and serving all of us. We should all be able to criticize government. Government should have enough of a thick skin to hear the criticism and say, you know what, okay, that's correct, we'll work on it, or no, that's wrong and this is why you're wrong. But when government wants to silence criticism, and then we are even helping them by saying, hey, stop criticizing government, we are just telling government, don't improve, continue to ruin the country.
And to add to this, you are not a graduate until government says you are. You cannot walk until government says you can walk.
That's right.
You can't buy anything until government says this is the means of exchange. I'm trying to analyze this so that I will drive home the message.
You're not a human being until government identifies you.
Until government identifies you as a human being. You're not even a Nigerian until government says you are. So government is so powerful. And so when we leave everything to a few people and believe because they are government they can ride roughshod on us, then we are making a very big mistake, because the government or the president cannot be all-knowing. We are not operating a monarchy system of government where the king can do no wrong. We are operating a democracy where sometimes we have to point out some of the ills, some of the areas that the government is not seeing to them. And so, if as bad as Goodluck Jonathan's government was, people are now looking back and comparing that bad government, even the same government, are comparing themselves, benchmarking themselves against the failures of Goodluck Jonathan's administration, then it means that they have not added anything to the problems that we have had since 59 years ago. Rather, they have removed from it. If they leave office today, what will they be remembered for? That's the question they should be asking themselves. And not somebody coming to tell me that, yes, I'm PDP, I'm critical of this government.
Now,
no, quickly. let me. No, I'm not. Those ones don't bother me. Oh. They don't really.
We're out of time.
Will tell
we're
you.
Right out of time.
No, quickly. So that we will understand the enormity of the problem that we face. You tell government there's insecurity. We say, during Goodluck Jonathan's time, it was like this. After all, Boko Haram had territory there. Now, at least they don't have. They didn't come. Government should realize that they did not come to benchmark against the failures of the past. They came with the hope of correcting those failures. And nobody is telling them, turn Nigeria to El Dorado in 4 years or in 8 years. At least give a roadmap so that others will follow from there. But by the time you are lost in all of this, and then people are looking at you and saying, look, the solution you are profiling to the 2019 problem are solutions of 1984, then I think you need a rethink.
All right, our last caller, Hannah, talked about the price of rice, which brings me to the economy. Some of the things that the president talked about, his administration's efforts include, things like, the economy recovering. He points out that we have had 9 straight quarters of growth. I have to ask you, you are the venture capital executive in the room. So that means that economy is your rice and beans.
Right.
What's your take on his assessment?
Well, let me start by pointing out the president played with the numbers there a little bit.
Okay.
What I mean by that is, yes, we've had 9 straight quarters of growth, of positive GDP growth.
Okay.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Only 3 times in those 9 quarters was that growth above 2%. Each other time, the growth was 1.8, 1.7, 1.4. One of the time it was 0.6.
But it's a growth.
But it's growth, right? Now, in all those 9 quarters, population growth was at least 2.6%. Meaning in every single quarter, GDP growth was lower than population growth. So yes, okay,
so that means
I'm adding more rice. I'm buying more rice in my house, but more people are coming from my village to my house too. So even though I have more rice than I had yesterday, rice is still not going around. In fact, it's going around less than it did yesterday. So even though our economy is growing, we are getting poorer because our population is growing faster than the economy. So this growth is not enough. I would like to point out that Professor Chukwuemeka Soludo, who has just been added to the President's Economic Advisory Council, pointed out that Nigeria needs GDP growth of 7%. So we cannot really be celebrating GDP growth of less than 2% right now. It's just not. It's just not.
And quickly, before I leave, you see, the problem in all of this is when the PDP government rebased the economy, they said, oh, fantastic, the fastest growing economy in Nigeria now. And then Alhaji Lai Mohammed, the current Minister for Information, said, look, you can rebase, it can be fastest growing on paper. The man on the street is not feeling it. So in this growth,
and he was right.
In this same growth today, that's why the man on the street is asking also, we want to feel the growth. And look, let's tell ourselves the truth. You can't actually plan for a country when you don't even know the numbers. So we need to do the first things first. Until we do all of those things, we'll just be going in circles. You make one gain here and you make 2 losses in this other area. And at the end of the day, when you balance them, it amounts to a loss. So we want the government to succeed. But if we all keep quiet and fold our hands, the government won't succeed. It behoves on us to begin to point out these areas and these challenges. And then also, the onus is on government now to confront those challenges frontally. Otherwise, if you are looking for those criticizing you and then you want to silence critic, you end up running around in circles looking for critic. And then 8 years' time, you want an extension, realizing that you've done nothing for 8 years.
Now, the president talked about a road infrastructure tax credit scheme, Mr. Buhari'S, to get the private sector involved in road construction. What exactly is that scheme?
Okay, so that's a situation where it was actually suggested earlier in the year, like almost at the beginning of in the first quarter anyway, where basically government doesn't have the money to build all the roads and bridges that we need, right? We have a serious infrastructure deficit, and government doesn't have the money to do it. So private sector has the money, but private sector normally won't come in and build roads and stuff like that because there's no profit in it for them. But what the government is saying now is, okay, come, if you use 2 billion naira to build this road, we will remove that 2 billion naira plus JARA from your taxes. So let's say you normally have to pay over the next 10 years, you're supposed to pay 3 billion in taxes. After you do the road, you only pay 500 million in taxes over the next 10 years. So basically, we're removing the money that you spend on building the road from your taxes, and with a JARA as a thank you. So that's basically all it is. And it's a good idea. And the question now becomes, will the private sector believe the government and trust the government and actually do it?
And now there's something Mr. Shroma talked about, going in circles and coming back where we are. The president said his administration is committed to being prudent with oil revenue and will continue to save. Now, I emphasize the word continue because it means the president is saying that his administration is already saving oil revenues. But every single budget President Buhari has written has been a deficit budget. That means that all his budgets have spent all government revenue for the year, including the oil revenue, and then borrowed to fund the balance. So how can the president talk about saving all revenues while running deficits?
Yeah, Sandra, when I heard that earlier in the morning, when I heard him say that continue, I was actually taken by surprise because I'm like, when did we start saving that we're now continuing to save? And it's not just President Buhari. I should point out that President Jonathan also ran deficits. Basically, since Yaradua was president, we've not had a budget surplus. So every year after year, we're not saving any oil money. We're using all the oil money, all the tax money, we're using all of it, and then we're borrowing on top to fund the budget. And even then, the budgets are not being fully implemented. So yeah, I don't know. Somebody within the president's team should have to come out and explain that statement because that's just factually inaccurate. We're not saving. I think I would go so far as to say that we can't save right now. We can't. Like, we see all the things that we need to do, and the revenue is just not enough. And the question now is, well, that little revenue, are we using it wisely? Are we applying it wisely? But definitely for the near future, we will not be able to save.
Okay, that's where we wrap up this conversation. Unfortunately, the time flies when you're having a great time. Our news is up at 6. On the other side of 6, during I Beg to Differ, let's talk some more about this hate speech thing and social media, shall we? I'd like to hear the debate that you can put up about social media and which one's more divisive for the country, insecurity or the speeches that we make online. I am Sandra Ezekwesili.
I'm Aghogho.
Thank you so much, Mr. Buhari'S.
Thank you.